Welcome, friends. I wanted to do a little tutorial today on these roses. I had several of you write to me and say you love roses, but you were having a little bit of trouble creating them. So I'm going to try to go over some of the strokes, and then I'll paint several so that you can watch me, and I'll try and get as close up as I can. Um, so this is a little rose here I did. I did another one the other day. I don't have it in front of me, but it had some orange in it, and you seem to like those. I think it's right here. 1 minute. So this one right here. So we'll play with that. Let's kind of practice some of the brush strokes first. And really, all of the brush strokes in these roses are a C stroke. Now my supplies today, I'm actually still playing with this Degado brush. This is in my supplies list and in my descriptions. It's a pretty inexpensive brush, so I'm not sure how long it will last and keep its point, but it's been kind of fun to play with. My normal brush is, as you probably know, that Princeton number 8 round. That's kind of been my go-to, but I have been playing with these Degados, and for the money, they're pretty good so far. We'll see how long they last. I'm using my Winsor Newton paints, and I have this fun little palette I got on Amazon. It just fits in my hand pretty nicely. I like it. It's got 1, 2, 3, 7 spots for paint, and I kind of like that. I've got my 2 containers of water. I've got my one pretty large one that I fill up every day, and it's large enough that I don't have to fill it up too often. You don't want to have muddy water. And then I also have my rinsing container here. So let's start off by practicing, just doing a little bit of a warm up here with those C-shape brush strokes. So of course I'm going into my Quin Magenta. As you know, if you've been following me here, it's my absolute favorite color. And Opera Rose as well. But let's go into this. And I find it's good for these tutorials because it's bright and you can see it. So that works out well as also. So let's practice some C strokes. That's really go to my tutorial of, I think I called it warm-up exercises, and it's like 15 minutes. Do that several times a day, especially before you start to paint, because it's going to help you gain that muscle memory. So when you go to paint a flower, it's like, oh, I know how to make that shape. I know how to do that. I still paint pages and pages of these things, friends. So you never really grow out of that. And the more muscle memory you can create, the more ease you find with creating these because you're familiar with it. And of course, the more familiar you are with it, the more confident you're going to be in sitting down to paint something. So the C strokes, we're just going with the point of our brush, and you're holding your paintbrush pretty vertical and very light pressure. Okay, so we're just creating these C strokes, tiny little C strokes. And that really is the center of a rose, which you're going to be painting. So just practicing these little C strokes. I just do a whole bunch of them. And the center of our roses are going to have a pretty dark value because, of course, the center of a rose is the darkest, and as you move out, it kind of lightens up in most cases. So let's just practice some of these and kind of putting them into these little bunches. So C stroke, and you can have them curving, inside of themselves. something like that. You do want to leave white area around. So just practicing those C strokes. Okay. And I'm always, when I'm going into my paint, so this is like a tea consistency. It's pretty liquidy, just like tea. I can move it around easily. But what I always typically do is before I go onto my paint, I kind of tap it and just get rid of that excess paint in my brush. So let's continue with these, just creating these little C strokes, these little half moons. Just doing a bunch of these till after a while, your hand just knows how to do these. Okay, so I'm doing the C curves, kind of a left one and a right one, just like that. Okay, just do a bunch of those until you're doing it without even thinking about it. That's the muscle memory I'm talking about. So when you sit down and you decide to paint a rose, it's like, I know how to do that. Now we're just going to expand on the two C's that kind of came together like this. And we're going to start expanding on that. We're going to go out a little farther. So like that, there's the two. And then just keep going and having them kind of curve into themselves. Okay? And now, of course, on a rose, the center is going to be tighter. And as you move out, the strokes are going to get a little bit longer. They're going to get lighter in value, and they're going to get bigger. So let's just practice that. So let's start with the center. We just keep going. And now they're getting a little bit bigger. You're maybe putting a little bit more pressure to get a little wider, like that. Now you're pressing down. You're connecting some of them. Okay, so just start with that. So you've got this round circle of all C strokes, and they're getting a little bit bigger as you move out. I could keep going here. Okay. And now I could start pushing down and they're getting even bigger. So just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's practice that again, starting small. And now we start getting longer, bigger, like that. Okay. So this is great. But what we want to do is we don't want all this white space in there. So what I've shown you in the past is creating these in the middle first, okay, with quite a bit of paint, more paint than water because you want a dark value. Now I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to tap it off just to get rid of the excess of water. And I'm going to go right around the edges of these last brush strokes, creating more C strokes, but I'm just barely touching those lines that I made with the edge of my brush. And then I'm closing up a few of the gaps just with the point of my brush. And you can pick up just a tiny bit of the pink and go into those wet areas, and you're just creating more and more of those C strokes. Now, I don't like real definitive lines, so I'm constantly softening those. Okay, I don't want these hard lines on my paintings. Okay, so now this is very light. So what I will do at this point is I'll go in with another color or even the same color and just start kind of creating some little dark lines here and there where it's wet. Now, if it's already, if it's already started drying and you're getting these hard lines, I just go up to it with a damp brush and just soften those lines, okay? Like so. Now, this rose I just did is kind of, you've got a little bit, it's sideways facing. So I've put a lot more petals down here with the center of the flower up here. So it's kind of facing this way a bit. I don't tend to do them like front facing. I don't know why. It's natural for me to kind of do them facing one way or the other. So all you're doing with that is bringing those C strokes down more on one side. Now I'm going to, just for interest, go into this with a tiny bit of orange. That's pretty watery, so I'm going to add some more paint to that. There we go. Now I'm kind of getting rid of some of the drippiness, and then I'm just touching in, just creating some C strokes here. And letting it, because it's wet, now this is drier, so I'll go into that with some water and just letting that blend. So I rinse my brush, I tap it on my paper towel, and now I'm going to go in and soften some of these so that it's not quite so obvious. Now once this dries a tiny bit, I'll go back in with my Quin Magenta again and just tap into that center. Okay, and you can even go back into some of these while it's wet and create a little bit. There you go. So there's a rose for you. Now, like I said, I don't typically go head on. I kind of like to face them in different directions. If I was going head on, I would just keep all the petals pretty even like this and then be going into it with my wet brush. But I kind of like that interest of facing them in different directions. So let's do another one and go through that process again. So I'm going to create an orange one here. Oops, I automatically went into my Quin Magenta because that's my favorite color. And I'm going to start off, so there's my paint. I'm barely scraping just to get the real excess off. And then let's go in and create our center. So you start with the 2 C strokes like this, and then you just keep adding on. So here's the center. Okay. Now I can already see I'd like some more paint in there. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to make this one more round just so you can see. Okay, so now I've got that. I'm going to rinse my brush, dry it off to get rid of some of that excess. So I've got a damp brush, but nothing that's going to create puddles. And I just go around and I'm going in the direction of little C's, and I'm touching here and there. You want to leave a lot of this white space. So you're just kind of joining some and then going around the edges. Okay. Little C strokes. And I'm going to show you something else in just a minute here. So now I'm going in with a little bit more of this orange paint while it's wet, and just some more C strokes here, okay? So there you go. Now again, I don't like these hard lines, so I would go in with a damp brush, just kind of soften some of those so they're not so obvious. And then I might go in here with even a little bit of, well, let's go opposite this and let's use a little bit of that pink. See what that does. I bet that'll be really pretty. And just touching into the middle. Isn't that pretty? You could even do a couple of these here and there. Okay? I mean, you know, to be honest, you guys, this is your rose. Like, make it whatever colors you want. Okay? So there's that rose. Now that's pretty abrupt colors, but you know what? I like it. So do it how you like it. I'm going to give you one more little tip. So on the roses, it's also important. You don't want to have all your petals exactly the same, like following each other. What I mean by that is, so you're making your little C's. You don't want them to just be in a perfect circle, one behind the other, like this. Okay, so it's just one big circle. You want to vary them, kind of like bricks are laid. If you know what I mean, I don't know what that pattern is, but you have them staggered so they're not just all lined up. You don't want to line up all the petals because that looks kind of unnatural. So when you're doing these, you want to be, let me grab my pen and see if I can, this might show up better. So in your roses, you're starting with that type of thing. And then you're going around. So each petal, they're not one on top of each other. You're staggering the beginning and ending, if you know what I mean by that. So they're all different lengths. They're not just like this, right? Does that make sense? They're not one line behind the next. They're staggered. So I'm going to go in between these and end like that. I might go like that. So I think that makes a big difference in your paintings. And where I see people really challenged is staggering these lines like so. So you want to start the next petal in the middle of this petal and then end in the middle of this petal. And then you want to also start getting larger, wider, like this. So your petals, as they get bigger, they become wider. Another thing I noticed is roses, they will kind of even start like this, right? Now that I exaggerated a little. So you're starting and ending in the middle of the previous line. You're not just doing circles. And then as you widen out into your petals, I find with my brush, I just intuitively am kind of creating this shape. So when I get towards the outside of the petals, I'm pressing, widening, and then coming back in like that. So these petals are just basically the same. They're just kind of a little line. And as I start widening out, I'm kind of doing that type of thing. Okay. So they're coming more into a C shape like this instead of so round, if that makes sense. So I hope this is helping you. And then what I'm doing is going up to these lines and I'm just kind of following them again and and watering them down because I don't like those those real sharp lines. That's why I like watercolors, because they're very soft. So I'm adding more and more water. I'm going to try and do another one here with a bigger brush. So let me find my bigger brush, which I don't normally use, and see if I can make one a little bit larger for you. Let's see. I've got this, 1 second here. I am trying to find my Princeton brush. Let's see, what number is this? That's an 8. I have a 10 somewhere. Here's a 16. I'll try with this. I don't really paint with this, so let's give it a try, and I'm gonna hope for the best here since I'm doing this for you guys to show you. Hopefully I can do this. So I'm wetting my brush. Now this 16, boy, that's a big brush. That feels really kind of uncomfortable for me because I don't paint that big. It holds a lot of water and paint. So let's give it a try. I'm going to start with the middle of my flower. So I'm starting with these little C curves. Ooh, this brush is big, guys. It uses a lot of paint. So I'm just kind of going over these. Okay, so I've got the middle of my rose here. Now I'm going to rinse my brush. Takes a little bit more to get all that paint out because the brush is so much bigger. And actually I've got a little bit on there. And I'm just going to get rid of the excess water. Now let me give this a go. I'm going to start going around with mostly water and just touching the edges of these painted areas. Okay, ready? Let me do that again. Just soak up some of that excess. And I'm going in those C shapes, just touching the edges of those petals. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of crazy. See? Even for me, sometimes these are a challenge. I have not used this brush. It holds a lot of water, folks. Okay. So I'm going to go in and just kind of combine some of these edges, just kind of play here. Wow. Here we go. I don't want quite so much white space in there, so I'm going in and kind of adding in some water here and there. Okay. Now I'm going to go into these outer strokes, and I'm going to go in with some of my paint. And just add in some color into, so this is wet on wet, okay? Now I don't like that hard line, so I'm rinsing my brush, scraping it on my container, dabbing it off, and I'm going to go around and just kind of soften those edges. That's just me, okay? So there's a rose. Now what I might do is go in with a little bit of cad yellow. Let's see what that does. Okay. Boy, this brush is definitely taking some getting used to, folks. I'm in such a habit of using my brush. Okay. So I'm going to play with that. Cad yellow can be a little bit intense. So I'm going to water it down a bit. Now I'm going to go back in here and just creating little C strokes, letting it kind of blend with the pink. But I love these colors together. Okay, look how pretty that is. Okay, I'm just kind of touching in. And then, honestly, just letting the paint do, whoa, do its thing. This brush is so big, it's kind of has a mind of its own. So there is a larger rose. Now, I'm not so happy with this. I think it's just because I'm using a different brush that I'm not used to. I definitely like my smaller brush, I think. But again, these are just these C strokes that you're using and playing just like that. I might go back in and just add a little bit more paint, a lot of value, which is more paint, less water, to the inside here. Just touching in there like that to kind of draw attention to the inside. Might go around a couple of these edges. I don't know. I'm not sure about this brush. Anyway, there you go. Now let's add in a couple leaves just for good measure. I'm going to rinse that brush off. And we'll add a couple little rose leaves here. I'm telling you, if you want to paint big, boy, get us this 16 Princeton round. This is the Heritage brush. Okay, so we're going to, let's see if I can do this. Need a little bit more color. That was a little too watery. So let's add that. There we go. And so I think I can kind of save this rose. Not really happy with it, but is what it is, right? Roses usually kind of have those jaggedy edges. So anyway, I hope that gave you an idea of how I paint roses, and remembering you're starting with these little C strokes and then you're expanding out, but you're making sure you're not placing each C curve right behind the last one, so you don't have this type of look. You're starting in the middle and coming into the middle of another one, so you're varying those C strokes, okay? And then you're going in with full paint in the middle, and then wetting your brush and getting the excess water off and continuing with C strokes, just touching the painted lines you started with your brush and letting it spread. And as you expand out, you're getting larger, you're getting thicker strokes, and you're even creating this type of shape like I shared with you. So as you get to the outer edges of your rose, the petals are kind of more like that type of shape, okay? You're kind of like that because they're getting bigger, okay? And you're varying, so you're starting petals in the middle of one, you're going like this, so you're not just following around, okay? So I hope that helps you. Let me know. Check out my little warm-up exercise, and I would do a page of that every morning before you start painting. And I had an interesting comment, which I really resonated with, and this one of my subscribers said she loved doing a page of just brush strokes and colors and kind of playing. And I said, you know what, do that, do lots of that. I have a lot of that here on the back. I do that all the time. That's part of my warm-up. And again, the more you practice those strokes, go to my page with glazing and washes and really practice those things, because the more you're familiar with how the paint is behaving, you're going to feel really good about starting to paint some of these flowers, because you're going to have a familiarity with how the water reacts. So there you go. Let me know what you think. I hope this helped, and I will make a kit out of this for you, kind of a worksheet from the tutorial. I will sign it and label it, you know, roses tutorial. I'll give you the little swatch that goes with it, and I hope you enjoy that and it's helpful for you. Thank you, friends. We'll see you soon.